in jail for 6 months, or checking into the bonding system. You can't fix any of these problems unless you go and learn about them.
So in your view, did Justice Roberts make new law in Obamacare?
Did he make new law?
Yeah. When he said that the mandates were a tax. The law says it's absolutely not a tax, and Roberts says, well, I believe they probably intended for it to be a tax.
Well,
That's pretty much the words that came down from that ruling now.
I believe he issued a mandate, yes, and it would be classified as new law.
And he called it a tax, right?
You could classify it that way as well.
And
Obamacare across the board to me is just,
but it wouldn't have survived except for that ruling. And so what's the people's recourse when a justice does that? And you could say the same thing with Ginsburg and
yeah,
Keating.
that's it.
They should have recused themselves because they had already
Yes.
expressed their views.
Yes.
And
That's-
now we're stuck with it. So what could be done? What can be done now? Maybe another what could have been done right after it.
I don't know the answer to that.
But Congress has the power to remove it, don't they?
Yeah, but I don't know that it's gonna go down that road.
Well, they're taking the time about it as they are. Well, let me sneak in the rest of my question. If you
Now don't phrase it with sneak in.
No, I'm not. Unrelated though. What's your experience with no-knock warrants? And you think, is that something that the 435th would ever have any involvement in?
No knock warrants.
No-knock raids?
Okay.
Where they do have warrants, but they don't announce themselves, kick the door in.
Mm-hmm. And would the 435th have any experience with that?
Well, would that come up, in order to do that, they have to get a judge to issue a warrant, right?
Right. So the answer is yes, the 435th could have an experience with that, but I couldn't tell you if it was a definite until they showed up at my door with their affidavit and read the affidavit to make sure everything was in
Has that come before the court recently, or ever?
Oh, I don't know, but I would imagine possibly it could have, yes. I know that court has been on call, and so there's a chance it could have come before the court, for sure. And those affidavits, I think, would be available, public record.
Those are the sort of cases that the 435th hears.
Well,
Drugs, weapons, things like that, yeah.
they gave the 430, when the local board of judges, they took felonies away, and he had nothing, 0 cases, and they just sat there, the court just sat there empty. And then recently, and I noted that article in my answer on the questionnaire, the local board of judges regrouped, and they gave, I believe it was 21% of the caseload, of the total, all felony caseload back. So I don't believe is still carrying a full load. But out of those that were given back to him, they are felonies. So yes, they could include the possibility of a no-knock warrant.
Has he had to recuse himself for any of those cases that were given back to him?
It was just done in, I believe, August is when the decision was made, and it was a slow trickle of cases back. So we're now in December. I'm not aware. I know that there were lawyers addressing that issue, and they told the board of judges that they would be forced to file a motion to recuse, or they possibly could be committing malpractice. But I don't know for sure if they have actually done that. I know that he still retains a few of the sexual violent predator cases, and I know that some of those are actually going up for certain issues under the new statute.
I just sat in on them. Not his court, but his court, the visiting judge.
Oh, they had a visiting judge while you were there, and that's been recently.
I don't know if that is before,
Yeah, so
right before early.
we're paying that visiting judge to be there.
You visit your.
But we pay a number of visiting judges, and I have a real problem with us paying for judges that have been kicked out of office, unelected, so to speak, but kicked out of office. We don't believe that they were doing a good job, but now we're paying for them to come back and sit on our courts as visiting judges. I think that should stop.
Good point.
But that really wasn't my question, that was just a point since you brought it up. But are you familiar with Ted Poe when he was a judge?
Somewhat.
Okay. Ted did some things, John Devine did a lot of rulings the same way, where when they passed down judgment, it was good things that took place, humiliating people and making them pay for what they did. Billboards, for instance, you know, I ran from the law and the law won, or I beat my wife, and you know, whatever the case may be, and standing out on the street corners. This took place on 13, 14, and 336. On the South Loop, there was a teenager that ran a stoplight and killed 3 people. There's 3 crosses out there on that corner still today. The judge, part of the sentence that judge did was that boy has to maintain that property, making sure that there's no weeds, make sure that it's clean, there's no trash or anything else. If he fails to do that, he'll go back to jail. I think this is something that needs to be done in our courts. You know, I've had a friend that was killed by a drunk driver. The individual went to state prison, but still back out, and it's still a constant reminder for everybody when you pass it that took place. But that individual needs to have an ongoing thought about it as well.
A reminder.
Yes, and so I'm just wondering if you would be willing to be open to make sentences like that as well. I'm not saying you have to do the same thing, but a judge has a lot of leniency on the way things, on what they can do for judgments. I know, you know, back during Vietnam, there were a lot of kids that were given the opportunity they could go to jail or they could go in the military. You know, that was, and that helped a lot of kids grow up. So are you willing to do things like that?
I can't tell you how I will.
Yeah, I'm not asking you how you can do it.
But I'm gonna tell you this. As a prosecutor, I dealt with a few intoxication manslaughter cases. And, you know, sat with families who had basically lost their children because of another person. And so, as part of some plea bargains that I did certain requirements that they had to keep a picture of the deceased in their cell at TDC. Also, if they were at some point, you know, parole release, they would have to do certain things in regards to maintaining the gravesite or the expense. So I believe in what you're saying, and I've experienced it and actually done that in the past when I was on that side. And you know, before you were here, I know you were stuck in traffic. You know, silly things, even when I was a municipal judge, I would make young traffic offenders write essays to the community on what could have happened had someone crossed their path when they were going 80, or to possibly go down and watch school buses, because that was a school zone and you could have really devastated a family that day. So I believe in that type of sentencing.
Okay, so Dale, we got 5 minutes.
Okay, hopefully in my 2 minutes, I'm going to try for 2 1-minute separate questions. First one is, why did you decide to leave public service to go into private practice?
I was released under Brett Ligon's administration. I stayed with him for a year. I worked for 3 elected officials here in the county. Brett and I had some discussions, and it was time for me to go and do this.
Okay. And second of all, in answer to question 11, you made the statement, I do not believe that sentencing decisions should be based on recidivism rates. And I don't know that I'm
Yeah.
understanding correctly, but in other words, if you got a first-time drunk driver, I can see that they should receive one type of sentence. If you got a fifth-time drunk driver, a totally different one, and that's the way the system seems to work, so please
Right.
explain that statement.
I think basically, because I wasn't sure what you meant by recidivism. For me, recidivism is they've been to prison and they're out. That's in, the revolving door of a prison. And so I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, but that's what I took that you were asking. And so for me, that was, let's say that you've been to prison and you're now out. And you get arrested for a crime, right? In some studies for recidivism, just because you've been arrested, they're now counting that in their recidivism statistic. And I don't agree with that, is what I was trying to tell you. Is because you've been arrested, you haven't been convicted, right? And there's a big distinction there. So I'm not going to consider that, hey, you went to prison, you got out, you were arrested, the case is not disposed of. I don't know if you're going to be convicted. But I think what you were really asking, I think you just laid it out, was you're talking about just repeat offenders.
Repeat convictions.
Yes, yes. Okay, so drunk driving, I think, and I hate calling it drunk driving, driving while intoxicated, because that's actually a difference. A repeat offender in that arena, yes, you do have to look at the history of the offense and what they've done in the past, and that does come into consideration. But that is all, if you look at 3707, that's actually one of the considerations, their past criminal history. And you balance that with any mitigating evidence as well. Drinking and driving is, I consider it a violent offense, because I think it is. So it would come into consideration, their history on that type of,
Okay, thank you.
along with their age, along with a lot of things.
I want to follow up with a quick question, with kind of what I was into a while ago. So you're a law partner now, you have different partners
Yes, sir.
in the firm.
2 former prosecutors.
Okay, so what happens now if you do become the new judge? What would happen to the cases that are pending that you were handling personally?
In the 435th or or all the courts?
Yeah,
I have no cases pending in the 435th right now, and that
what
was
about
by
your law firm?
design.
What about your law firm?
I believe possibly one partner might have 2 cases there right now.
In the future, what would happen? What legally?
Oh,
What
I would,
happens if you become
yeah, I
judge?
basically would I would withdraw from all my cases immediately,
Your personal cases?
all of them,
What about,
correct.
but
And
your
then
law firm's cases?
the law firm will retain their cases.
But what if they come before the court?
And
Is that
Like I would-
conflict of interest?
Do you recuse
No,
yourself
I
in that case? or-
I would not recuse myself from a case that came before the 435th that one of my law partners represented a new case. Any case that we have as a firm now, until then, I would.
You would.
And necessarily, to be honest with you, I don't think recusal would be the way to go on that, because I wouldn't want to cost taxpayers money to have another a visiting judge here. I don't believe there'd be a purpose. We can do transfer cases within our courts without a problem, and I clearly would I believe Judge Mychalk probably had to do some of those herself when she took over, because she was in defense with Judy Shields at the time, and I would ask for a transfer of the case to a receiving court.
Whoever's, let me rephrase it. So if you're elected, would you anticipate that the court system would go back to normal the way it was before, receiving criminal cases and all the other cases?
100% I am. Before making this decision to run, I spoke with many of our local judges, specifically about that issue, because everybody was very frustrated that the court was sitting there not working, and rightfully so. And so I spoke with many of them, and I can say with 100% certainty, we'd be up and running day one.
Okay, that concludes our Q&A. If you'd like to do a closing, you're welcome to do that, or we can
I just-
continue with questions.
I want to thank y'all for your time very much, and I hope that voters will get out. I hope that you will try to meet all the candidates and really have an understanding of these benches and these races. And I certainly hope that you will vote for Patty and bring life back to the 435th District Court.
All right, great, thank you very much. He's gonna cut off.
Okay.